October 18th, 1942. Adolf Hitler signs an order from the Supreme Command of the Wehrmacht. It is addressed to every field commander on every front. The order is short, it is precise, and it is criminal. It says this: any Allied commando unit caught operating behind German lines, in uniform or not, armed or surrendering, must be immediately executed. No interrogation, no prisoner of war status, no trial. Execution. On the spot. Hitler does not issue orders like this out of contempt. He issues them out of fear. And the question you have to ask yourself is, what kind of soldier makes the most powerful military machine in history so afraid that its supreme commander decides the laws of war no longer apply? The answer is 575 volunteers from the United States Army who, in the summer of 1942, stepped off a train in the Scottish Highlands and began a journey that would permanently reshape the way Americans fight. Their unit had no battle history, no tradition, no legend. It had one man. His name was William Orlando Darby. He was 31 years old, an artillery officer from Fort Smith, Arkansas. He had never commanded infantry in combat. He had never led a raid, he had never trained commandos, and he was about to build the most feared American fighting force of World War II from scratch. This is the story of Darby's blueprint, the system of training, selection, and tactical doctrine that turned ordinary American volunteers into soldiers capable of doing what no American unit had done before, making the Wehrmacht genuinely afraid. The year is 1942, and America is losing something more dangerous than battles. Credibility. The British have been fighting since 1939. Their commandos have been raiding the European coastline for 2 years, hitting German installations at Lofoten, at Vargso, at Saint-Nazaire, and withdrawing before the enemy can organize a response. They are lean, ruthless, and tactically sophisticated in ways that conventional infantry simply are not. The Americans arrive in Northern Ireland in January 1942 with almost none of that. They are fresh. They are enthusiastic, and they are almost entirely without combat experience. General George Marshall, Army Chief of Staff, knows this. He visits British Combined Operations headquarters, he watches what the commandos do, and he comes back with an idea. What if America built its own version? General Lucien Truscott Jr. writes the proposal in May 1942. He reaches back into American history, to the frontier raiders who harassed the French and their Indian allies in the forests of the Northeast, and gives them a name: Rangers, not commandos. That is British. This is something American, something that carries the weight of the wilderness, the capacity to strike from nowhere and disappear. Now someone needs to build them. Captain William Orlando Darby is an aide-de-camp to Major General Russell Hartle. He is an artilleryman. But he has presence, intelligence, and an almost physical restlessness that everyone who meets him notices immediately. Private First Class Thomas Sullivan, one of the first Rangers, writes in his diary, Major Darby, an impressive man, real soldier all the way. When Darby is told he will command this new unit, he asks one question: how much freedom does he have? The answer: total. He starts with a blank page, and what he designs will become the blueprint that the Wehrmacht learns to fear. The first problem is the men. Notices go up on bulletin boards across U.S. Army camps in Ulster. The language is deliberately vague. Volunteers wanted for a special unit requiring individuals not averse to dangerous action. No further detail. The Army wants self-selection first. The men who step forward knowing almost nothing about the mission are already demonstrating something essential: a willingness to move toward the unknown without flinching. More than 2,000 men volunteer. Darby and his officers interview everyone personally. They look for things no fitness test can measure: judgment, adaptability, the capacity to function under extreme stress without freezing. Only 575 make it through. They range from 17 to 35 years old. Factory workers from Detroit, farmers from the Midwest, former athletes, former students, drawn from the 34th Infantry Division, the 1st Armored Division, artillery units and support battalions. They are not chosen because they are killers. They are chosen because they have the potential to become something more dangerous than killers. They can become thinkers who kill. Hull. On June 19, 1942, the 1st Ranger Battalion is activated at Carrickfergus, Northern Ireland. Darby, now promoted to Major, addresses his men for the first time. The ranking officer present will be the first to tackle every new obstacle, no matter what its difficulty. I included myself in this rule. It is not a speech, it is a contract. On a morning in late June 1942, the Rangers step off a train at Fort William in the Northern Highlands of Scotland. The bagpipes of the Cameron Highlanders are playing. The air is cold, carrying the smell of pine and peat. The mountains rise on every side, dark and indifferent. Waiting for them is Lieutenant Colonel Charles Vaughan, who commands the British Commando Basic Training Centre at Achnacarry Castle. Known as the Laird of Achnacarry, he is not warm. He greets the Americans with a thin smile and says he is looking forward to getting started. Then he turns around and begins walking. It is 14 miles to Achnacarry Castle. No trucks, no rest. The Rangers follow. None quit. What follows over the next 3 months is one of the most systematically brutal training programs ever devised in the modern era of warfare. Brutal, not in the arbitrary sense. Brutal in the way surgery is brutal, precise, purposeful, designed to save lives by destroying everything soft. Speed marches through the Scottish mountains. 15 miles, 20 miles, 30 miles at the end of the course, full pack, at a pace just below sprint. One Ranger veteran describes it years later. The training made him have muscles everywhere. But muscles are the least of it. The real goal is psychological. Darby and his British instructors want to push every man past the point where he believes his body will quit, and prove to him, over and over, that it will not quit unless his mind allows it to. The obstacle courses are unlike anything American soldiers have seen. The Tarzan course at Achnacarry involves rope bridges, water crossings, and elevated traverses, all under live fire, real bullets, real explosions. The course is infamous throughout the Allied command. Several men are wounded during training. One Ranger is killed. The calculation is cold and correct. A man who learns to perform under genuine fire in training will not be destroyed by genuine fire in combat. A man who has never felt real bullets near his body will freeze the first time he does. In the cold water of the Highlands, in the mud and the rain and the dark, the Rangers learn something that cannot be written in a training manual. The difference between controlled fear and paralyzing terror. They learn to feel fear fully and keep moving anyway. Weapons training covers not just American equipment but German and Italian arms, because a Ranger behind enemy lines may need to pick up what he finds. Close quarters combat, drawn from the methods of Fairbairn and Sykes of the Shanghai Municipal Police, is taught with clinical intensity. A Ranger within arm's reach of an enemy soldier must be able to end the encounter in under 3 seconds. Not a theoretical goal, a measurable standard, practiced until automatic. Night operations dominate the schedule. The Rangers learn to move silently through terrain that would be difficult in daylight. One technique stays with many of them for life. Press a bayonet into the ground and put your ear to the handle. Distant sounds that the naked ear cannot reach travel through the earth. They sit in total darkness for an hour before missions, letting their eyes adjust, so that when they finally move, they can see things that men who have not done this cannot. Demolitions. Amphibious landings rehearsed in Scottish lochs and on the rocky coastline near Dundee. Close quarters combat. Navigation by stars. The training builds competence in every dimension of warfare that does not involve mass firepower or armored support. It is deliberately designed for situations where there is no air support, no artillery, and no way out except through the problem in front of you. Of the 600 men who arrive at Achnacarry with Derby, 500 complete the course. The 40 who cannot are returned to their original units. Not in shame, in acknowledgement that what Achnacarry demands is beyond what most human beings, regardless of courage or intent, can deliver on command. The 500 who remain are not the biggest or the strongest. They are the ones who, when everything in them said stop, kept going anyway. Derby is not a distant commander. The moment his Rangers return from Scotland, he sits with the 50 men who participated in the Dieppe raid, embedded with British commando units in August 1942, and he listens. What broke down? Where planning failed? What they wish they had known? The lessons are sharp. Intelligence is not an advantage before a raid, it is a survival requirement. Timing must be absolute. A minute's delay can transform a surprise into a slaughter. He creates a new training program on top of Achnacarry, designed, in his own words, to make Scotland seem easy by comparison. He devises a communication system for absolute darkness, flashlights with pinpoints of different colored light, letting small groups signal and coordinate without a single sound. He leads speed marches himself. His officers know they will be first through every obstacle, not because Darby orders it, but because Darby is always already through it ahead of them, waiting on the other side. The Silver Star he earns in North Africa is awarded for a personal reconnaissance under enemy fire to gather intelligence before a raid. He does not send men to do what he will not do himself. He walks into the dark, gets close enough to count enemy guns, and walks back. This is the second half of the blueprint. Not just the training, the leadership model. Darby demolishes the distance between officers and enlisted men. Every officer knows what every soldier knows. The result is extraordinary internal coherence. Decisions at every level, made by men who have done the work, felt the cold, and survived. When Darby is offered promotion to Brigadier General after Sicily, offered it personally by General Patton, he declines. I felt that I could do more good with my Ranger boys than I could with a regiment in a division. He means it. And the Rangers know he means it. November 8th, 1942. 0200 hours, the coast of Algeria. The 1st Ranger Battalion approaches Azov Harbour in British landing craft, small, open, rising in the cold Mediterranean swells, no lights, almost no sound. Somewhere behind them, the ships of the Allied Centre Task Force wait. In front of them, 2 coastal artillery batteries with the firepower to shred every landing craft approaching Oran. The entire Allied operation, Operation Torch, the first major American ground offensive in Europe, depends on those batteries being silenced before dawn. Darby splits his battalion. He takes 4 companies against the Batterie du Nord on the high ground. Major Hermann Dammer takes 2 companies against Fort de la Pointe at the water's edge. Both attacks must happen simultaneously, in the dark, with no artillery preparation, no air support, and no margin for error. Darby leads his men through the surf, up a steep cliff path, moving fast enough to use the darkness, slow enough to stay silent. By the time the garrison hears anything, the Rangers are already inside. At 0400, 4 green flares rise from the hilltop, visible 5 miles out to sea to the ships of the 1st Infantry Division. The beaches are open. Come ashore. The price, 2 dead, 8 wounded. Against 2 fortified artillery batteries and a garrison that had no warning until Rangers were among them. General Eisenhower attempts to promote Darby on the spot. Darby declines. He is already planning what comes next. Tunisia, winter 1943. American units have been throwing themselves at the heights east of El Gheta for weeks. The Italian defenders hold every approach. Division after division sent back bloodied. General Terry Allen calls Darby. Is there another way? Darby's Rangers, patrolling at night, have found something. A path along the northern flank through terrain so difficult the Italians never bothered to defend it. 12 miles of raw mountain country, in the dark, carrying everything needed to fight at the end of it. On the evening of March 20th, they tape their dog tags. Metal on metal makes noise. They blacken their faces. They move in silence for 12 miles through the gorges of the Jebel Ankh. At dawn, the Rangers are in position above the Italian camp. Behind it, Darby gives the order, "Okay, men, let's have a shoot." The bugle sounds the charge. 500 Rangers come screaming down out of the hills onto a garrison that has no idea how they got there. By afternoon, the valley is in American hands. More than 1,000 Axis troops captured. The pass opens. Patton has his breakthrough. In the camps of the German Afrika Korps, reading the battle reports, interrogating prisoners, something registers, something quiet and specifically unsettling. An American unit has just walked 12 miles through terrain the professionals dismissed as impassable, in the dark, without making a sound, and attacked from a direction that made no military sense until it succeeded. The Germans give them a name, the Black Devils. Schwarzer Teufel. Not a compliment. An acknowledgement, the kind of name you only give to something that frightens you. July 10th, 1943. The beaches of Sicily. One of the largest amphibious operations in history. At the center of the American landing zone at Gela, the spearhead is not a division. It is Darby's Rangers. Force X, the 1st and 4th Ranger Battalions, hits the beach in pre-dawn darkness. Rangers who have been seasick for hours, vomit and keep moving. They take out coastal guns and fight into the town of Gela before the main Allied force has cleared the waterline. Then the counterattacks begin. They have mortars and captured artillery and the aggressiveness that makes a lightly armed unit fight at close range. Naval gunfire directed by Rangers from the waterfront tears the Livorno assault apart. Savannah fires 500 rounds of 6-inch shells, the Rangers take 400 prisoners from the dazed survivors. Then the German Hermann Göring Panzer Division arrives. 18 Tiger tanks rumble into the streets of Gela at noon. Rangers face the most heavily armoured vehicle in the German arsenal with rifles and a single captured 37mm anti-tank gun. Darby personally drags the gun into position. He calls for naval fire. He refuses to give ground. When the afternoon ends, 12 German tanks are destroyed. The beachhead holds. Patton arrives on the beach, corrects a Ranger captain's unbuckled chin strap, and tells him, "Kill every one of the bastards." He awards Darby the Distinguished Service Cross and offers promotion. Again, Darby declines. Again, German Panzer Commander Paul Conrath files an after-action report on the American commando units that held Gela against his armoured division. He notes, with professional bitterness, that a lightly armed force of this type should have been driven into the sea within 3 hours of the landing. It took his division 2 full days, and it still was not enough. And this brings us back to where we began. October 18th, 1942. Adolf Hitler issues the Kommando Befehl, the Commando Order, distributed through the Supreme Command of the Wehrmacht to every field commander. Any Allied troops caught in commando-type operations, raiding, sabotage, infiltration, are to be immediately executed. Not interrogated, not treated as prisoners. Shot. On the spot. The justification: commando forces use brutal and treacherous methods. That they cannot be permitted to succeed. Read that again. The most powerful military organization in the world is issuing a formal order directing the execution without trial of small Allied units because it cannot figure out how to stop them any other way. This is not policy. This is panic dressed in bureaucratic language. The Commando Order is a criminal document. It violates the Geneva Convention. Several German commanders who enforce it will be tried for war crimes after the war. It is one of the clearest examples of the Wehrmacht's complicity in the criminal apparatus of the Nazi state. But as a measure of fear, it is unambiguous. The kind of soldier Darby is building, mobile, night-trained, explosives-capable, psychologically hardened, striking from directions that conventional doctrine says are impossible, is precisely the kind of soldier Hitler's order is designed to destroy. Not defeat, destroy, exterminate. Because the Wehrmacht has concluded there is no conventional military answer to what these men do. January the 30th, 1944, Anzio, Italy, 0130. The Allied beachhead has been bottled up for 8 days. Field Marshal Kesselring has pulled together 71,500 German troops and built a ring around 69,000 Allied soldiers on the beach. The plan to break out assigns the spearhead to Darby's Rangers. The 1st and 3rd Battalions, 767 men, will infiltrate 5 miles through German lines in darkness and seize the town of Cisterna di Littoria before dawn. What no one at Allied headquarters knows, German intelligence has identified the plan. The Hermann Göring Panzer Division and the 715th Infantry Division, with 17 Panzer IV tanks, are waiting. When the Rangers emerge from the drainage ditch at dawn, still short of their objective, they cross open farmland under conditions that make their entire tactical doctrine irrelevant. Infiltration, speed, surprise, darkness, all of it gone. The ambush is total. They fight with everything they have. The 1st Battalion commander, Major Dobson, personally climbs onto a German tank, jams a white phosphorus grenade down the hatch, and kills the crew. Individual acts of extraordinary ferocity keep the fight alive for hours. It is not enough. 12 Rangers are dead, 36 wounded, 743 captured. 6 men walk back to the Allied lines. 6 out of 767. One account says that when the last radio transmission fades and the silence settles over Darby's command post, William Darby, who has never broken in front of his men, who has led every march and held every beach, weeps. Not from weakness. From the grief of a man who knew every one of those voices by name and had to listen to them disappear one company at a time. The Ranger Force is disbanded. Survivors are absorbed into the 1st Special Service Force, the Devil's Brigade, which carries Darby's methods forward to Rome and southern France. Darby is reassigned, returned to the United States, and comes back to Italy in the spring of 1945. On April 30th, 1945, 11 days before the German surrender, a German artillery shell kills Brigadier General William Orlando Darby near Lake Garda. He is 34 years old. Congress makes his promotion official 1 day after his death. What Derby built did not die at Cisterna. It did not die on Lake Garda. It lives in the 75th Ranger Regiment today, in the selection process, in the standards, in the doctrine of small unit autonomy and the expectation that officers lead from the front. On June 6, 1944, at Pointe du Hoc, Rangers of the 2nd and 5th Battalions scale a cliff under German fire using grappling hooks and rope ladders, exactly as trained at Achnacarry 2 years earlier, and destroy the artillery batteries zeroed in on Omaha Beach. They hold that cliff for 2 days against German counterattacks, outnumbered and without resupply. They fight exactly the way Derby taught them to fight. A German officer at Anzio writes in his diary about the American-Canadian 1st Special Service Force, the unit that absorbed Derby's survivors and continued their methods. The entry is captured after an Allied raid. It reads, "The Black Devils are all around us every time we come into line, and we never hear them." That is Derby's blueprint, in a sentence. The Wehrmacht never found a complete answer to it. They issued criminal orders. They ambushed Rangers in open fields. They sent entire armored divisions to stop what 2 lightly armed battalions were doing on a Sicilian beach. And on every occasion when the fight was on the Rangers' terms, when they had darkness and speed and surprise, the Germans lost. That is the only testimony that matters. Not what the Rangers said about themselves, what the enemy said about them, what the enemy feared enough to put in writing. What the enemy killed for, in violation of the laws of war, because they had no other answer to a 23-year-old from Ohio moving silently through the dark with camouflage on his face and the memory of 3 months of Scottish Highland brutality compressed into his muscles and his nerves, closing the distance at the end of a 12-mile night march and not slowing down when the shooting starts. William Orlando Derby built that. In 1 summer. From scratch. With a bulletin board, a blank page, and 575 men who said, yes.